Jacob Eason, where they flash to his house and the family's just on the couch hanging out. And here comes Jacob Eason, like walking out of his bedroom, throwing his shirt on, and some hot blonde comes out walking behind him. His father just turns and looks at him, rolls his eyes, like, "What are you doing, bro?"
Yeah.
And then,
one in, Pops.
And yeah,
stress relief.
Take out my frustration.
Yeah.
Hey, and then the other good one that somebody sent me, and we're live. It's okay. In Vrabel's home, if you look closely over the mascot's shoulder, I guess one of his son was wearing the mascot, but like somebody was dropping a deuce and left the door open. And like the cabinet window reflection, straight up watching somebody taking a deuce. It's like, hey, welcome to the NFL Draft live stream, baby. And with that being said, welcome into the NFL Draft Bible La Familia recap show. It's 2020, 365 days down in the books. Woo. I'm already on that 2021 scene, putting players in the database this morning. Getting a grip for the FCS guys, all 6 of them that got drafted. Oh, my God, what happened here? Down from 13. We saw a low number last year from 13. This year down to 6. And the same thing with the non-combine invites. Very rough go for some of these small school guys. The agents still trying to get players situated. In fact, we'll have some players, Braden Fihoko from LSU, who signed with the Chargers, Ernest Edwards at 10:45, and Christian Roseboom with the LA Rams, who was also at the NFLPA Bowl. Shout out to all my NFLPA Bowl brethren for a job well done. 15 players selected in the 2020 NFL draft, up from 3. So I feel like we made some great strides there. And I think the record for NFLPA Bowl is 21. I promise you we will break that record next year. And also keep in mind, East-West Shrine Game brought like 140 players this year. The Senior Bowl brought like 120 players this year. So those were all-time highs. But it just goes to show you that if you're talented, we will find you, no doubt about it. On location across the nation since 2002. It's what we do at the NFLDraftBible.com, and we can't stop. We won't stop. I appreciate everybody holding it down for me yesterday. And I'm back in the saddle, alleviating my guy, Ryan Roberts. We'll start off with him, the scouting coordinator here at NFL Draft Bible. Ryan, it's been a long year, brother. We're going to break it all down. How you feeling today?
Everything's good, man. It's interesting, getting some of these undrafted free agents last night and this morning. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, but with everything, pro days canceled, all that good stuff, it's an extremely deep class that, I saw a couple teams with like 20 plus undrafted free agents signing. So it's a lot of talent even after the draft. We talked about that a little bit last night. It's a really interesting process, and I feel like we could do a whole show just on some of these talented kids that are just going to be undrafted free agents. But it's just an incredible cycle in general, and last little bit of it, and then we're off to 2021.
That's it. And, some teams like the Chargers signing 20 guys, or other teams like the Lions signing nobody. We go over to David Turner, former Panthers and Eskimos scout, and he has been with us all week. It's been a fun week having you along for the ride here, David. Great analysis throughout the week. We're on to 2021, but we've got one more day to break it all down, 2020 recap edition.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. This has been a ball. John and I have known each other for years, and getting to know you and Ryan and the rest of the staff. It's been incredible to share this opportunity. I love the draft. I've been watching since I was 9 years old, and to do analysis like this with you guys, it's been awesome. So thank you for the opportunity.
It's been a pleasure. And John Murphy here, Toronto Argonauts, longtime CFL executive. And John, it's been a fun 2 decades, brother.
Yeah, no doubt. So we'll hit the mile marker next year, as you corrected me the other day before this one. So I guess we'll have to do something early that morning to commemorate that at some point next year. Probably a little pre-draft drink.
Yeah.
Wherever they're holding it. Hopefully we're not still sitting in our houses at that point.
That would be Cleveland, my friend.
Yeah, skipping right over Vegas and going to Cleveland. So hopefully, Browns fans hope they're not on the clock early. I'd say that right now. They're very much hoping they're not on the clock early to celebrate that draft.
Hopefully,
But that's a big part of the draft, right? Like all those years, growing up, Turner saying, he's been watching it, since he was 9 years old. I was taking the train in since 14 years old, sneaking out, taking the train to the city. My mom had no idea what I was doing until I was forced to tell her, and stuff like that. And, I think, bringing it around to different places certainly brings a different vibe to the draft. And I think, even with the funny stories that are going to come out about things that were going on and things that we saw, a lot of people getting signed this weekend. One person we know for sure is getting released, CeeDee Lamb's girlfriend. She's going on waiver wires for sure by Monday. So I think, it was kind of a very interesting thing behind the scenes to literally see all those guys, in their homes, right, where they grew up, where they were first watching the draft, and thinking about playing in the NFL. And for a lot of those kids, they got to get drafted literally at home. So I think that was interesting. Also very interesting to hear NFL head coaches and GMs admit to the factor that it's a lot easier to draft when you're chilling, in kind of shorts and a t-shirt than a suit and tie. So kind of interesting to kind of hear some of the things that I bet moving forward, 10 or 15 years from now, we're going to see something or some element of the draft that will be taken from what we did the last 3 to 4 days. Right.
Yeah, no doubt.
Some element of this is now going to be included and involved. Whether it is like, Turner, said, when you're watching teams and they were announcing those picks, certain teams had their fans, other one had the first responders behind the scenes. The Broncos lit it up and had the cheerleaders, kind of behind them. But I think you're going to see a lot more of that, to where, yes, they may have those 10 or 20 or 30 kids in a green room still, but it seems like they may be celebrating kind of all of the picks from now on. Because, heading into the second and third day, that was probably the coolest part, of watching the draft, was the commentary. You could turn the volume down when Booger started talking, but, behind the scenes, it was great
turn us on.
Yeah, great to see. Turn, like the mute button was better to hear than that, but, basically the 6th and 7th round kids, to see how excited they were, to see how much it meant for them to hear their name called. But to actually have that captured rather than just hearing about it in a written article later on, I think was pretty cool. The unfortunate part is what you said, right? It boiled down to exactly what Russ and Dave said, day one and leading into the week. The unfortunate thing is, as much as everybody tried their best to come up with scenarios and ways to create information in the last 6 weeks, NFL teams, if you're not doing it yourself, if you're not hands-on, literally, with that kid, if it's not your watch or somebody in your organization, if it's not your doctor, or trainer or somebody in your organization, it's just too difficult, for them to invest a draft pick in a guy that they didn't see or put their hands on if there was an issue or a character issue or academic or medical. And I think that's why you saw a lot of those kids. We mentioned last night, Trey Adams completely not drafted, Thaddeus Moss undrafted. Adams has a longer medical history that could have happen regardless. The Moss thing with an injury being that something that happens, kind of just, in the time that we're dealing with right now, no chance for anybody to examine him and know how close is he going to be. Is he just a PUP and gone for the year and redshirted, or might he be somewhere in the summer? And Tyler, the center from Wisconsin, I mentioned it to you, about a week ago. I think he was starting to get a little flag there, and without having that medical recheck, right? That's everybody waited to hear, hold your breath and wait to hear about your prospect or wait to hear about that player, after the recheck at the combine, without having a medical recheck that the NFL organized and that the NFL, information got out there. I just think it became too difficult for them to invest a draft pick in certain guys. And that's why I think you'll hear a lot of different stories coming out in the following weeks about where people could have gone and where they expected to go, and then really what ended up happening in the draft.
The stories I've already heard, I can't wait till the movie comes out, and I might as well write the script. We can all get together and write that script.
So you're saying Kevin Costner's going to make another movie?
Oh God. Well, one thing I will say is that I do agree with you. I'll echo the sentiments where, I think it's a lot cooler and more fun watching the teams react with their families, as opposed to just constantly panning back to the green room, to the green room, to the green room. Like, I really don't need to see Lee Steinberg sitting next to Tua on their phones. Like, Like that's not exciting to me. So I thought it added another element, and also like the families getting to share in the process and seeing what they all do, what that all entails. So I agree. I think there's going to be a lot of staying elements. It seemed like everybody enjoyed it except for the commissioner, who was falling asleep there on his recliner, putting back the soda pops there towards the end of the draft.
That's why I said I couldn't believe at a certain point of the draft, Mr. Rogers was calling out the names.
Yeah, so we're gonna break it down before we get into some team analysis. Some numbers, and these are unofficial, but they're pretty accurate. David, I'd like to get your reaction to them because you've been in the war room. It says here 115 underclassmen declared, only 72 were drafted. So that leaves about 43 or so who went undrafted. I also saw out of 255 picks, 203 came from the Power Five, and only 6 FCS, which means, okay, maybe like 40 players from the mid-major conference. But I mean, listen, if you're in the draft business, start with the Power Five. I think it's always been that way, but I think because of the lack of pro days, to John's point, teams not being as familiar with some of these injured guys, these small school guys, we really saw a big emphasis, and 93 guys from the Senior Bowl drafted, teams feeling more comfortable taking those caliber kind of prospects.
Well, that's always been the trend. I mean, when I was at the Raiders, you did a study with Tom Delaney one year for Mr. Davis about where the playoff teams were shopping. And if you really look that year, out of all the playoff teams, the biggest conferences they took were Power Five, SEC leading the way, ACC being second at that time, and then you had Big 12 and Pac-10 back then. So you really saw those conferences dominating, and even more importantly, you saw those conferences dominating in priority free agents getting signed. So that's been the trend. Where I really feel this year, what hurt the kids that didn't get drafted from FCS and smaller schools is it's almost triple fold. First, a lot of scouting staffs have gotten small, as we've seen. They get lean. Coaching staffs have gotten bigger, while scouting staffs have gotten smaller. So getting into the small schools is often just an area guy going through. If he writes a draftable grade, then they go, okay, let's see what he runs in the fall or in the spring, and if we like him, we'll bring him into an interview, or we'll fly him out for the physical. Well, that's the part where teams leaned on this year that didn't happen. That spring workout to see what his true numbers were, his measurables were, and then be able to grab a kid. Yeah, they can interview him via Zoom or Skype or something, but they couldn't bring him in and touch him and get a physical on him and really prod him. So that part of it, that checkbox, as we always say, scouts check boxes, that checkbox didn't get met. So then how can you go invest in a guy like that versus – like when I was a Bledsoe scout for Carolina, I would go to all the big schools religiously, right? I would measure and weigh them. A lot of schools don't let you run them, but you can at least confirm measurables on a guy, confirm weight on a guy. You can talk to a strength coach and say, what's he usually play? And they have those numbers for you, what weight and everything. So at a small school, you can't get all that information. It's just not there. They don't collect it. Then you go into looking at, how do these small schools take advantage of things? Well, there's small bowls like the FCS Bowl, National Bowl that was down in Daytona, Florida. There were like the Gridiron Classic. And then, I went to the Hula Bowl this year after the NFLPA game. You look at all those invitees and you're like, who burned it up there? Who did really well there? And then did those guys get combine invitees? But they didn't have a pro day. Right. So if you didn't have a pro day to verify a scout who might have been like the Iowa State wide receiver who was at the Hula Bowl had the best week. I mean, he was great. He's a 6'3" kind of guy. I think his name's Michael. Was it Petway?
Petway, yeah.
And it was like he had a great week, but he couldn't run. He didn't get an invite. So people look at his film and be like, oh, he played at Oklahoma, went to Iowa State, had a good year, but we think he's a 4.6 guy. If he would have came out and run a 4.52 and justified the guy at Hula Bowl scout report, I mean, that could have really helped him get somewhere and do something. And here's a kid who played it, not even a small school kid. He played at Oklahoma, Then he went to Iowa State as a grad transfer. He's smart, doesn't have off the field issues, and he didn't get a sniff. So those players totally got swept under the rugs. And when you talk about the draft history and stuff, I think this year, with a takeaway that all these GMs need to learn from, I think there is a lot of A and A+ drafts that teams had because they had more time to digest the tape. They had more time to digest things because they weren't scrambling around. They didn't have all these other things going on. So they could sit and really look at it. And I think there were less misses this year than before. It hurt the small school kids. I think it was a stronger draft overall for the whole league. And when you look at where they shop, it's definitely Power 5. It's definitely SEC. But it doesn't mean that's the only place if you don't get a scholarship for the young kids listening to one of those Power 5, it doesn't mean we're not going to find you, like you said earlier, Rick. We're going to find you. We're going to do our time. There is a scouting report out there on some of these small school kids that definitely want them on their team, and they would have been invited to rookie mini camps to make their impressions. But this year is just a unique situation where we can't do all that scouting and all that stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. Ryan, your thoughts here just on the draft general overview. I feel like teams that are confident in their scouting department that don't put themselves inside the box, like you saw the Patriots use their first pick on an FCS guy, and maybe a little bit unorthodox and traditional teams. Most teams subscribe to the Blessed Over National. New England's out there doing their own thing, but to me, I'd like to see more teams have the confidence to dip their toes into the outside the Power 5 conference, because man, there's so many talented players that I saw, and I just feel like that the bias, right, the labels come into play, and I believe that many of these men holding the GM chairs, no offense, they just don't have the balls to go outside that box, go non-P5, and really go out on a limb, because hey, if it doesn't work out, well then hey, guess who they're going to point the finger at? And Bill Belichick doesn't have that problem. And I think the teams that did do this, and there aren't too many of them, I think they're the ones that are going to really kind of position themselves here to move up the totem pole.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about it a lot last night about the part. I mean, just an organization in general, departmentalizing and working together, and the cohesion that is necessary. I feel like something for that. I mean, Russ said it, a couple times during the week that unless teams have verified times, they've verified heights and weights, it's tough to, put your neck out for that. So on that instance, I don't blame them for sticking to the players that they know, the players that they can verify all those things for. I know it's a tough part of everything. And, from the moment that this hits, the pro days getting canceled, the first thing that I'm going back to is the small school kids that aren't going to have the opportunity, because we talked about this being almost a threefold job interview, with the ability to potentially play in the all-star circuit, to go to the combine, potentially to the pro days, is kind of the last opportunity to get your name out there for people that aren't familiar with you, making you go back to the tape. Unfortunately, this process hit those smaller school guys, the guys that didn't have those verified times, that they weren't able to get in front of scouts as much as the other guys. So I just feel like a lot of GMs, a lot of scouting departments just went back to what they know for sure, the sure thing. And if you're going to, at the end of the day, no one's going to be 100% correct on these things. So I guess you're going to say it's kind of natural. You're going to go to what the unknown is scary, and the unknown is something that you have a hard time betting on a lot of times. So I feel like we talk about how the kids are handicapped a lot. I feel like obviously a lot of scouting departments were handicapped if they didn't have the necessary ability to understand how those players can translate with the traits that they have, or how they can potentially fit.
Or have scouts just fallen in line so much that, prior to this season, I used to consistently say 90% of your grade is your film. I no longer believe that going through this draft process, because scouts are so scared. Front offices are so nervous to take a small school guy or a non-Power 5 conference. I'll give you a perfect example. The Dallas Cowboys drafted Broderick Washington, I think, in the 4th round. Okay. Texas Tech, right? Rondell Carter who signs with Dallas after the draft as an undrafted free agent. We had both of these guys out in Pasadena. Okay. I can tell you they are very equal, and you could state a case that Rondell Carter might even be better than Broderick Washington. Okay. But because one went to Texas Tech and the other finished his career at James Madison, one player goes in the 4th round, another guy goes undrafted. And then you got a guy like Chauncey Haney from North Greenville, who's got more upside than the both of them. I'm not even sure he signed a contract yet because they're scared. They're scared to put their reputation on the line. And I think, that's what you find in a lot of these war rooms is you get scouts that are scared to stamp their name on a small school guy, stand on the table and put their reputation on the line. There's too many guys nowadays that want to be conservative, give you the safe answer, give you the safe pick. Man, I'll tell you, if you are an opinionated scout, if you have confidence and trust in your ability to identify talent, man, there is really going to be a home for you in the NFL because there's just not enough guys like that. And that's the bottom line.
Well,
NFL
I'll say
team,
this.
Go ahead, David.
I'll say this. There's not a room for you in the NFL. You know why? Because you don't fall in line. You don't fall in line. You don't march to the same drummer. You're going to challenge people to think. And what do people not like to do? Think. They just want to collect their check and go home and guard their desk and not have a chance to get better. They don't want to get better. They don't want to be special. They don't want to compete. You know what they want to do? They want to sit on their couch, feet up, and collect their check and
Leave
say, guess what?
By halftime.
Yeah, you know what? I saw this kid. I put him in the 4th round. He got drafted in the 6th. Great. I saw this kid. I put him in the 6th round. He got drafted in the 5th. I was in distance. It's not about getting it right. It's not about pegging a kid. It's not about, doing this and that. I remember when I was at the Carolina Panthers, I went into Fort Hays State. Fort Hays State. You know where that is? It's in the state of Kansas in bumfuck Egypt. Excuse the language. But I went in there and I saw this kid, this D tackle that at that level, 2 and 3 people could not block. And I'm like, why is this kid unrated? The Bledsoe scout from the year before had him unrated. I put him in the 4th round. The next week, I put a New Mexico State kid in the 4th round, and I put a DB from Arizona in the 6th round. Okay, all those players got drafted. One's name is Dane Greenshank. The other kid was Jaleel Scott. And the kid that went from Fort Hays State went 72 overall to the Jets. Okay? But I put my nuts on the table. And I said, these guys belong. I saw scouts the next week, like, you're making me go to Fort Hays State because I upgrade him. I'm like, no, you don't have to go. You don't have to see him. It's fine. He'll be at the Senior Bowl. And they doubted me. They didn't think, where'd he go? Senior Bowl. And the first couple of days before he broke his hand, he was tearing it up. He rose up. People were like, oh, my gosh. They didn't want to go to BFE and find the player and turn over every stone. But guess what? In Carolina, that's what's expected. My mentor, Dave Gettle, who taught me stuff at New York Giants, that's what they expected. Al Davis, if you didn't know that Fort Hays State guy before he got upgraded, you could have been fired. But I've been fortunate to learn from some of the best guys who said, you got to have passion to do your job. You got to talk with conviction when you love a player. If you don't love this game of football and giving kids chances, don't be a scout. Don't just be a check collector. But the NFL is made up of check collectors that don't rock the boat. Ask Murph. Murph, I've known how long, Murph? 18 years or something like that?
At least.
And I've known John Murphy. Him and I have had some very passionate conversations about players and everything. But why is Murph not in the NFL? Because he challenges people. He's smarter than people. People can't control John Murphy, and that's what they have a problem with. Because you know what? He is better than 90% of the freaking scouts I've ever worked with. And
I would go to war with this scouting staff right here. And you know what? I'm content not working in the NFL. I'll continue to run circles around 90% of the front office departments in the NFL because we're more prepared than most front offices are. Go find me the NFL front office with 622 scouting reports. They just don't have it. They're not going that deep. Charlie Waters, when he was with the Cowboys, he said, man, we hated your ass because Jerry was saying, well, why don't we have what Draft Bible has? Right. And,
right.
And I'm happy. I'm happy doing my all-star circuit thing. I'm happy doing the Draft Bible publication because you know why? I'll be sitting here in front of the fans again next year while, other guys are looking for jobs and so be it. But hey, you want some real deal Holyfield moving and shaking, hiring one of these guys to come run your operation and see how fast you catapult to the top of the list. Because I'll tell you this, I can go find a guy I can go pick, 5 to 10 guys from the undrafted free agent list right now and probably have a better draft than some of the teams had. Okay. So that's just the bottom line, but you have to be willing to, Dave's point, have the conviction, be confident in your ability. And it takes a while to really feel confident in your ability to just not give a fuck and say, hey, this is my guy. Right. And John, I'm sure you want to chime in here before we get to team by team breakdowns.
First off, I couldn't argue with anything Turner was saying.
You shouldn't. You know better.
No reason to. There's no reason to. But I think that's the biggest, I think that's the biggest thing is that nowadays, the people that are sitting in the right chairs, unfortunately, believe that they should hire people who are just going to agree most of the time. Or if they are going to disagree, they're not doing it in such a way that it appears to make them look either ignorant to something or not on top of everything. Well, the bottom line is, the further you ascend up the food chain, much like you learned yesterday, Rick, sometimes the less you get to do the parts of the job that you like to do the most. So you have to be willing to trust that those other people are doing it the way you either A, taught them to do it, or B, explain to them the way you want them to do it, so that much like yesterday's show sounded like today's, sounded like the day before, didn't totally look different. The information wasn't different, and the way that it was done wasn't different. It was the same way that it's been done all week. Same thing. If you're in the bigger chair, you're not supposed to just know everything, but you are supposed to be able to trust those people that they are going to give you that right content for you to then spend the time, to quickly glance over it and make sure that that's what you see and that's what you believe. But you don't have to pretend like don't give me an answer if you don't have it. Go find that answer and then bring it back. Don't try to be like, yeah, that guy, don't worry about that guy at Fort Hayes. He, I talked to somebody there, they're not high on him or things like that. And then having so many younger, inexperienced people that are tied to whoever hired them makes it be that they just have a list and they're okay just going off of that list, as opposed to all the people who invested time and effort and phone calls and emails and messages with me 20 years ago. Those guys were grinding to death. They were, the first thing all of those people would say when I was like, well, what's a key idea? Tell me something I need to learn, or give me an idea about something. It was like, hey, if there's another school and you're down there and you're doing all those Alabama schools, take the ride over to Alabama A&M, or pit stop by Alabama State, or pit stop by Tuskegee when they tell you there's no reason to go by there, just in case you found a reason to go by there. And that was the way that job was done in that time frame. But it also was a mentality, right? It was also an approach, to things. And you're literally talking about, a who's who of people, when you're saying, what kind of guys were doing that. Because I'm not talking about people who have all gone and ascended. Some of them have, like some of those people have ascended. Trent Baalke ascended, to being a GM, butCio Mercado was proud to be a lifer, as a scout, and was going to go to Texas San Antonio and San Marcos. He was going to go to every, kid that he could imaginable, and even started hosting basically an event for all small school kids in Texas, and basically said, yeah, I don't care about that 60 mile or 100 mile radius thing. Just show up and we're going to put a clock on you. And if you're good, you're good. And if you suck, you got your 40 and you're out of here, type thing. But those guys did the job differently, which led to different results, right? You saw back in that time, the Central State, the Northeast Oklahoma, you saw a JUCO kid, a kid that went and played in the CFL, got drafted, in that time frame. So it was just, I think, measured differently because the job was done differently. Now, all joking aside, as we were joking before we went on air, literally, if some people could do it, and just get an idea of seeing something off of the film, they'll cheat enough to just be like, okay, I don't have to go do that. But maybe you caught a kid on his best day if you went to that small school, and maybe you caught him on his worst day, but you're not going to know if you don't go and do the work. And that led me to, the statement last night, and it's not just particular to the Jets, but a lot of people. If your board sucks, you can't have a good draft if prior to the fact, your board doesn't match what your scouts are giving you, or if your scouts are not giving you the right information to get your board right. So to me, if you're the smartest person in the room and you're the GM, that's your fault for not being smart enough to add other quality people around you that aren't always going to just say like, yeah, thumbs up, or might kind of come to you on the side and know like, hey, there is a politically correct way of doing it, right? I mean, I never went and said to Coach Huff, I never would have had the audacity to say to him, hey, I'm going to challenge you in front of the whole staff and say, you as the head coach GM didn't watch that guy. You don't know what you're talking about. But at the same time, after we finished the meeting and I knew we still had time, leaving a name on his desk, putting the film and loading it up and literally putting it on pause. And when he came back, he was like, what the hell's this? I'm like, oh, I wanted you to watch that guy. I loaded it up for you. There's ways to go about doing things that can lead to better results. To me, that's the bigger question is, do they have the nerve to think outside the box enough to improve what they're doing? Because you did see some teams, and I think that's the next thing we're going to go into. You did see some teams that the reason to me they had better drafts this year is that you could tell that the cohesion in their building is starting to change, right? The optics in their building, you sometimes want to change the culture in your locker room. You know what is a really good way to do that sometimes? Change the culture in your coaching and front office department.
Yeah, I think the Colts are a perfect example too, especially there on day 3. It's like you see the picks they made, and I can go identify which area scouts are responsible for that selection because
Right.
Chris Ballard trusts his army. And, I mean, they're as good of a staff as there is in the league right now, in my opinion.
But look where he came from, right? Like if you look at those guys, what are they all going to have in common? At one time, they were those guys. Yep. Right? Chris Ballard was always thought of as an above average, scout, and wouldn't have had any problem if that's as far as he had ever gone. That would have been fine in his mind because he was okay with it. Look, even Jacksonville bouncing back, and having a solid draft. At the end of the day, Dave Caldwell is a personnel guy now, right? He's a GM, seat right now. Where did he start? As a road scout, as a scout. The same thing, now with Joe Douglas being there, with the Jets. A lot of people, when they assume that role, they go one of two ways. Either they forget about that and they stop paying attention and they think they've suddenly become a lot smarter than they were, or they kind of ground and pound and stick with their guys knowing that, hey, like, that's no longer what I'm doing, but I respect the hell out of the fact that that's what those other guys are doing and what they bring to the table. To me, I'm like, hey, you're always going to get the credit. You're the one sitting in the chair. I don't mind if the only time you ever get credit or your name gets mentioned is when they're handing you the trophy. I'm good with that.
Or handing you the check. It's the NFL Draft Bible live stream show here. We just went into draft philosophy 101. I didn't mean to take it there on you, but as you guys know, there's nothing better than discovering a guy who's not on the list, right? You go into a school and it's like, hey, I got a guy. He wasn't rated. I'm going to write him up. And like, that's the best feeling as a scout. I think too many times, like to John's point, you've got your Blesto or your national. It's like, hey, here's our baseline. Here's our foundation. And a lot of these younger, newer scouts is like, hey, we're just going to send you into school. Go be an information gatherer.
Yeah. Well, I said the funniest thing, the two funniest stories about that ever is that basically when they were seniors going into their senior year, the NFL scouting had Arlen Harris listed as Arlene with an E at the end of his first name, Harris. No information because he was caught in between transferring from Virginia to Hofstra. And the other kid whose name was misspelled was Marquise Colston. Didn't have his name spelled correctly, had nothing on him because he was rehabbing from a shoulder surgery the year before. And the coaching staff got so pissed that their guy who looked like a real dude, and is at Hofstra, went and had a second opinion and had surgery So when the scouts came through, he was not allowed to be training in the room with the football players because he wasn't active yet. They had him in the training facility with all the other athletes, mainly over there with the softball players and the water polo team and stuff like that there. So when the scouts came through in the spring of his senior year, he wasn't even in the football building. He was training with the other athletes because he was basically pushed over there by the coaching staff. And only by the grace of God, that two guys got hurt in their bowl game, did he ever make it into the East-West Shrine game. And it was only because basically for the first time in 3 years, I said like, hey, I got one guy for you. Would you put him in the game last minute, even though you've never heard of him, never heard of his school, and you're not going to believe the story if I tell it to you, and stuff. And it's just as simple as that these kids always prove out that if given opportunity, it's not about them, doing their share. It's that the person that's scouting, like Dave said, you have to have the audacity to stand there and say, no, that's my guy. Let's give him a shot. That, hey, that's my guy. He deserves a look, whether it's watching his film or going to the pro day workout, or like I said, just going out on a limb and saying, like, hey, that's a guy to bring in. If you brought more of that to a club, there's nothing wrong with it. The problem is, like Dave said, if you do it, you're probably putting yourself at a high risk not to be around too long.
Hey, people can be sensitive in this business. There's no doubt about it. And the ones that are confident and open to, open dialogue are the ones that have success. Ryan, I feel like we got to inject you into the show here. It's the NFL Draft Bible live stream. Ryan Roberts, David Turner, John Murphy. Let's talk about some of these teams, who's moving, who's shaking. We'll kind of go by division. Ryan, I'll let you take the NFC East here. You're in Jersey. I'm in Jersey. The Giants, they've got some help here on the offensive line. Gettleman continues to kind of stockpile the linemen. We saw Willie Hernandez. We saw them sign Nate Soldier. Now they're drafting Andrew Thomas. They bring in Matthew Pert. If they don't get it right now, I don't know what they're going to do, but they're all in on the offensive line. Daniel Jones has some stability. They added the X-Man there on the defense. I like the McKinney, Jabril Peppers dynamic there. The Redskins added Chase Young. Obviously, they're becoming now Ohio State East, it seems like. Did these two teams do enough to close the gap between the Cowboys, who now have a potent trio of receivers there, and also the Eagles, who redesigned their whole offense radically on the fly here? Their receivers suddenly looking more like the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Cowboys and Eagles are really looking to air it out here. Have the Giants and Redskins done enough to close that gap?
I think the Redskins are in a deep rebuild here. I think they're a couple years away, obviously, but I think I really do like what the Giants did, with Matthew Pert and Andrew Thomas, and they're solidifying that front. You talked about Hernandez already up there. So, that offense should be a lot of fun to watch if Daniel Jones can take that next step forward. I don't think that defense is anywhere near competitive enough, even in last year was not a great show for the NFC East, but I still feel like the Cowboys and the Eagles are clear cut above the Giants right now. I think that the Giants are definitely heading in the right direction. They're building the right way, inside out. I love a lot of what they did do. Like a lot of what the Redskins are doing too. I just feel like they're a little further away. And then we talk about the Cowboys. The Cowboys, with Mike McCarthy coming in, a couple of the guys they were able to add, I feel like the division in general should be very improved. And then, the Eagles with the wide receiver crew. Last year, they had no speed. They had Nelson Aguilar, who – it's been well publicized what Nelson Aguilar was with his speed, but not being able to secure the football too much on the vertical plane. And now they complete rebuilt. They add a ton of speed. Jalen Reagor, they got Quez Watkins late there. So, and they traded for Marquise Goodwin. So a ton of speed. It's going to be able to open things up a lot. I felt like last year spacing was so limited. Everything was so condensed. Everything was in a tight window just based upon how their quote unquote playmakers played the game. Now we have Jalen Reagor immediately going to win in that vertical plane, open things up underneath. So I feel like the NFC East in general is going to be a very improved one. I feel like the Giants are getting closer. We'll see kind of how they do with Joe Judge moving forward here.
No doubt about it. That's the NFC East lowdown, the showdown, the bro down. Let's talk about the NFC North a little bit, David. Green Bay took a lot of criticism for taking Jordan Love. just a couple plays, maybe an 8-play away from the Super Bowl. People expected them to get more ammunition for Aaron Rodgers. Well, they got him a little bit help in the backfield, no receiving threats. But hey, it worked out pretty good when they drafted Aaron Rodgers to succeed Brett Favre. I don't understand all the disdain here for having that same model implemented. But, Minnesota, they're all in on Cousins. You got the Bears there kind of trying to find their identity at quarterback. And then the Detroit Lions, who, let's be honest, if Quinn and Patricia don't get it together this year, they could be out of there. How do you kind of see the winners emerging from this year's draft in the NFC North?
Well, I personally love the Jordan Love pick. I think, like you said, they're building for the future there. They're not saying, hey, Aaron, we're trying to push you out the door. But again, the facts came out. Aaron's older than what Brett Favre was when they drafted Aaron. They got a good player who can develop behind a solid, Pro Bowl quarterback. As an organization, when you have that opportunity, your job is to build a team that has, continued success. So to do that, to shore up a potential quarterback for the future at the 26th pick, given them the 5th-year option so they have time to develop this kid. I like that. The rest of their draft, because they didn't take a receiver high in the 2nd or 3rd or something round, I question what they're doing there. I don't know. Like I said yesterday's show, I don't see Goody's vision on what's going on there. But again, it could come clear later. It's one of those things. He knows what he's doing. He's been there. He's been a scout. They did really well last year. I mean, shoot, they were 1 game away from going to Super Bowl, right? So obviously they got a good young coach there. Their vision is different than what my vision's been, focused on in my career. And I look forward to seeing what they're going to do. I think their division got tougher. Minnesota took 16 picks. I don't know if I've ever seen a
modern day record. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen a team take 16 picks. They've always traded out of a spot, got picks for next year, collected. They said, no, we weren't good enough. We haven't gotten over the hump the last couple of years. We've seen, Green Bay ascend above us. So we need to do what's right. And they put people on notice. And look at what they did. They drafted all over the board, every position. They restocked wide receivers, offensive line, defense. I mean, you see, Spielman and George Payton taking it to them, and they're a scout-heavy team. I love what they did. And I tell you what, Detroit, I love what Detroit did in this draft. I really thought Bob Quinn went back to his roots, like John was saying. He got in there, he grinded the film, and guess what? Look what they did. They got some great help. Even deep in the draft, they got some great help. So that division is going to be very tough next year. I think Green Bay is still at the top. The Bears, Ryan Pace, came in late, didn't have a first-round pick, right? Came in late, made splashes in the 2nd and 3rd round with who he took. So I think that division got tough. I think Green Bay's still at the top. You're going to see, I think, Minnesota and Green Bay battling. But what Bob Quinn did this year and what Ryan Pace did this year, I think those two teams are gonna be fun to watch.
No doubt. So the Packers still the team to beat there. John, let's go to the NFC South. The Saints won a remarkable 13 games last year. Obviously, the Buccaneers, you see the Brady and Gronk 2020 campaign shirts going on and what they did, Ed and Tristan Wirfs. And boy, oh boy, it's got to be exciting there in Tampa Bay. And then Carolina, here comes maybe arguably the hottest young up-and-coming coach and Coach Matt Rule. They go entirely on defense. So Phil Sano is going to have fun kind of turning that defense over. And then, you've got the Falcons who, again, we talked about it, stumbled out of the gates, but, won 6 of their last 8 games to finish second in the division, respectable 7-9. This is going to be a very highly competitive division, I believe.
Yeah, no doubt. A lot of QB changes, and I think you could see, when you look at Atlanta, if they're correct in judging what happened at the end of the season, then this offseason makes a little more sense to me than, if not. If not, then it's going to be, time to hit the rebuild, button, and there'll be a lot of casualties, because of it. Because I think they tried to replace parts that weren't working with other parts that aren't guaranteed to work. They just are different parts at the moment, right? So get rid of Beasley, bring in a kid like Fowler, make the moves again. They double down and take Hennessy and try to keep improving the O-line that even with all their improvements doesn't seem to ever really work on the field in front of Matt Ryan. They changed their running back situation, go to Gurley, in place of, Freeman, but you replace one injured running back with another one who has some question marks. I think they are now going to set an all-time record. 9 or 10 of their starters on offense are going to be first-round picks. So that's going to be quite interesting. Carolina set a modern-day record by, I think, drafting 7 defensive players. So they're going the opposite way to compete against, Brady and Breeze and Julio Jones and Ridley by going all defense. And we spoke about that yesterday, which I said, in my mind, it's a smart way to go because the offense will get there eventually. You would hope with the offensive coordinator and the changes they're making, but it's not happening overnight. They still have some guys there that are not, kind of square pegs for what they're now going to do. So I think there's a few more moves to be made there with one or both of their receivers, potentially on the move out, at some point. So I think they can become more competitive, obviously faster and go into the football, the way that the young Seahawks defense did years ago, the way the Falcons young defense, played, several years ago, the way the Jaguars, when they had, that, humming for a 2-year period of time defensively. I think the Panthers would feel like by the time their offense catches up with the progression of this defense, 2021 or 2022, they're back in the, position to be challenging, for a playoff move. I think the Bucs accentuated a lot of the areas that they were looking at. The key or interesting one will be, can that kid from Wake Forest really fill that other back role? If Jones is going to be the first down, is this guy a third down back? Is that the role that they saw for him? Or will there be a veteran guy that, that comes along at some point that they'll add into there? Like if they could find a Sproles, right, or a Dion Lewis type guy, like that would be, what they don't have, right? Look what Brady's always had. He had Lewis, he had James White, he had Burkhead. Where's their version of that? That's sort of the missing piece, still in the equation. And then I think for the Saints, like I said, when you break it down, it's always about the points and the offense and the skill position. The two things that have cost them the most in the playoffs and in their deeper runs recently have been ineffectiveness in the big games to get after the opposing team's quarterback. And the other part is the play of their offensive line, right? I've banged the drum enough. I have no idea why you wanted to pay Andrews Pete more money to suck, but obviously, you did. Warford is making too much money now for his level of play. So I think there'll be a transition of one of McCoy or Ruiz to right guard, the other one to center. It'll save a lot of money. And then they'll use that number 6 kid that they signed, a year ago, who's a much cheaper version, of Watford, not as physical, not as a bigger bruiser guy as that, but good enough to fill in at the interior positions. They're going to feel like they can get some pass rush out of, Zach Bond. I think that was an excellent pick. And I think coming back in, as much as we made fun of, or I made fun of them using draft capital of the future for thing payoff today, I think also, what they saw was a top 50 pick in their minds, at tight end that they saw sliding down and available to them. So I would believe that the Saints drafted 3 guys in their top 50, probably had a top 20 grade on Ruiz based on how high they had, McCoy rated a year ago. And they're in it right now, right? Like these are draft picks for right now, to ensure what they have. But more importantly, then when you don't have Breeze at quarterback, you fortified the O-line, you added another piece to the defense. When they're not driven by the quarterback, they should be able to be driven by the other pieces that they've put in place.
And this morning, you wake up to the reports that the Saints are working out a deal with Jameis Winston. They signed Tommy Stevens. So if they lose Taysom Hill in the next offseason, they have a guy that could step up into that role. So rebuilding on the fly, reloading for the future. I think the Saints are still the team to beat there. Let's welcome in our first guest of the show today. He is Ernest Edwards. And, fellas, we talked about how the small school guys got hurt, especially when you play all the way up in Maine. Not too many scouts making the trek up there. Obviously, no pro day to work out, so he goes the undrafted free agent route, signed by the Los Angeles Rams, and we welcome him into the show right now. Ernest, how are you this morning? Congratulations, brother.
Good. How are you? Thank you.
Doing well. So let's start off with your initial reaction, waking up a member of the Rams. It's been a long waiting period, several months now, just kind of up in the air where my next destination is going to be, where I get to stick my nose in the playbook. Just take us inside your emotions this morning.
Oh, I'm excited. It's like some weight got lifted off my shoulders. Been waiting a long time for this since I was a little kid, so I dreamed of. So I'm excited, man. I'm just ready for my shot and go in there and do what I do best.
Well, we appreciate you having on. I'm Rick Saratello. We got John Murphy, David Turner, and Ryan Roberts here on the panel. I know Ryan's got a question for you.
Yeah, Ernest, appreciate you coming on, man. Pretty late notice. Excited for you to get out in LA, though, man, because, we saw Brandon Cooks leave this offseason. They definitely need an injection of speed, which you bring a lot. What was it about the LA Rams that, for you, maybe presented the best opportunity to compete for a roster spot potentially?
Yeah, so going in, I was talking to my agent, and I just knew they had some room on the depth chart, receiver spot. So I was looking at them and a couple other teams. But yeah, as much as I talked to my agent, and more we kept talking. We just found out that the Rams was the best spot for me to land a kick return job or punt return job. And I knew Brandon Cooks left. So yeah, man, I'm trying to be that speedster for them. Yeah,
it's an exciting offense to be a part of. Let's go over to David with a question.
Yeah, Ernest, looking at their draft, they only picked one receiver, so it makes a lot of sense for them to make you a priority as a free agent coming in. With that offense, where do you see yourself fitting in their scheme?
Yeah, I can do quite a few things, honestly. They can use me a little bit as the Tavon Austin type player, or even just me in the slot. Really, I could do everything, honestly. I could line up in the backfield, play slot. That's my primary position, and then I could also go on the outside and compete with the corners. So, man, I can do a lot of things for them. Honestly, whatever they want from me, that's what I'm down to do. So it's honestly just whatever they want.
I'm sure Coach McVay will figure it out. He's a smart young man. And go over to John for the next question.
So Ernest, to be honest with us, you really picked the Rams because you grew up upstate New York and then you played at Maine. You just want to play a game when the sun's out.
In the sun.
Pretty much, you were just like, let me not have to wear 9 layers in September.
I was part of it.
What was it like? I know you guys kind of put together a kind of your own pro day, right? With everything going on, with things, and you were able to do that. What was it like kind of, knowing what you had seen in the past, right? You saw, how guys do their workouts. You heard about what pro days look like and probably even went to one, prior to being into your senior year. What was it like then having to kind of, be almost like the producer of your own pro day and hope that worked? And it seemingly did, right? Because you ran like high 4.3s or low 4.4s doing it, so it turned out great, in terms of actually getting a chance to run and posting the kind of time you would have in front of people. But kind of explain what it was like to kind of have to go through that whole process of almost producing your own pro day.
Yeah. So it's kind of weird because I got the news literally like a week before my pro day. I was all excited. I had my family coming up and everything. All my teammates is going to be there to watch. So it's kind of weird. I was ready to put on a show for everybody and had the scouts there live with me see what I could do in person. But, everything happened for a reason. So we had to be creative with it. And then that's when my guy Bruce Johnson from Rochester, he hit me up saying he could do something and he could even have a live stream, knowing that nobody could be there. So that even made it more worth going. And then, man, we had a live stream. I know a couple of scouts was watching. I just tried to do my best out there. So.
Hey, Ernest, I remember your teammate coming out a couple years ago, Jamal Demby. He was training here in Jersey leading up to the draft. He also winded up with the Rams in the 6th round. So, one, did he give you any advice leading up to this process? And 2, has he given you any advice on what to expect in that sunny LA lifestyle?
Yeah, he definitely gave me advice leading up to the draft. He just told me to keep my head up. He hoping for the best. And, I mean, and just do what's best for me. Don't go to a team just because I like the team, but go because it's the right fit for me. And I feel like the Rams was a perfect fit for me. It's similar offense to what we had at Maine. So, and the terminology is almost the same. So that was definitely one of the reasons why I picked them. And, but yeah, now he ain't tell me how the LA vibes was yet, but I can't wait to find out. I've never been to Cali, so I'm excited.
Oh, you're going to enjoy it. It's definitely a great place. Let's go back over to Ryan for another quick question here.
Yeah, and Ernest, I know obviously you mentioned it a little bit, but the ability that you have in the return game. I know JoJo Natson left the Rams this offseason. There's a vacation. It's a vacated spot as a punt returner. You're also a great kick returner. How much did that influence your decision to have a potential to compete on special teams early as well?
Yeah, I mean, my agent told me that it was an opening in the return games, and that was another reason why I chose the Rams. I really looked into that, and I found out he did leave, so I wasn't happy. I mean, I don't wish bad for nobody, but it was just a spot for me that I mean, I'm trying to get. So it ain't nothing personal; it's just a business. But yeah, man, that was it.
Who's your agent, Ernest?
Josh Stevens from DEC Management.
Okay, I thought so. Fellow New Yorker. I know Josh very well. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, hey. Let's go over to David Turner here for another quick question.
So, can you help maybe other young men figure out, like, how did you come to pick Josh to be your representative? Like, what was that process like, so they could learn as they enter into the 2020 process now, how it's going to go for them, and what were the key components that made you choose Josh over what I'm sure you had a slew of agents, trying to pursue you?
Most definitely. I had a bunch of agents hitting me up my senior year. And it was just all about, getting to know them in person. He came to my house. We had a meeting with my family. And then, just knowing his background, everything he'd been through, and just knowing his connections. I didn't really want to sign with an agent that was just starting up because I felt like that was the best for me. I wanted somebody who been in the game for a while now. So, and that was DEC. They've been in the game for I don't know how many years, but I know he got some great clients. Probably his top client was DeMarcus Lawrence or Eric Weddle. So they definitely have connections, and that's what I wanted. I wanted somebody with the most connections, so I get some exposure.
John?
Yeah, that's a great lesson to learn from people, is that I think the biggest thing is, having somebody share with you what the best idea of where to go, and if you mention, not that you should, but, the other teams that were looking at you, but to be able to have somebody, as the draft is ending, be able to give you as a young person the perfect identity to say, hey, look, they don't have Cooks, they don't have Nats, and like, it's almost a near perfect cut and paste if you would have looked at it for yourself and had all that time. But amazingly, you have to literally fit hours of research into seconds, if not,
Exactly.
minutes, if not seconds, of making the right decision, to go somewhere. So, it'll be exciting once we all get started to see you in training camp. And I'm sure those DBs out there will need to take a step or two back.
For sure. But yeah, that's part of an agent's job, really, just getting all the details from me, all the little things that's in the depth chart, or what the team needs and stuff like that. So yeah, that's part of having an agent. I'm just blessed to have DEC because they one of the best to do it right now.
No doubt about it. David Cantor, Joshua Stevens there at DEC Management. Ernest Edwards here from Maine. Ernest, we appreciate you hopping on, getting your instant reaction to landing in LA. And we're looking forward to big things ahead for you. Any parting shots, shout outs, thank yous you want to give here before we let you go?
Yes, sir, for sure. First of all, I just want to thank Jesus Christ, Lord above, for just giving me a chance to continue my dreams in the NFL. And I want to thank my family and friends and everybody who supported me throughout this whole journey, man. I thank everybody.
All right. Well, we thank you for coming on. And, if Josh is your agent, I'm sure at some point you'll be down here in New York, New Jersey. So make sure you hit us up, brother.
Sir, I got you. Thank you.
All right. There you have it. Ernest Edwards, wide receiver, return extraordinaire from the Maine Bears, heading over to the LA Rams. And we thank him for joining us here on the NFL Draft Bible live stream show. We keep it moving and keep it grooving. Let's dive into that NFC West right after our commercial break here, Dakota. We talked about the Rams. We're going to run the commercial, come back, break down that NFC West. But I will say this, much like the NFC South, this NFC West is very, very competitive. Every team with a winning record last year, minus the Arizona Cardinals. However, with Cliff Kingsbury, Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, and added ammunition, they're looking to close that gap. A lot of young minds in this conference. You got Kingsbury, you got McVay, you've got Kyle Shanahan, all trying to achieve what the old grizzled veteran and Pete Carroll has pulled off, and that is a Super Bowl chip. And we'll talk about that NFC West right after this commercial break. Dakota, we good to go?
We are good to go.
Shit, that kid was better than some of their picks.
Yeah.
It's back, the official 2020 NFL Draft Bible, bringing you the names you need to know first since 2002 with insider access to players, scouts, coaches, and the entire draft industry. The 2020 NFL Draft Bible is available now both in PDF or book versions, featuring over 600 in-depth scouting reports, more than 175 player interviews, official combine and pro day measurements, plus our 2021 draft preview and mock draft. The NFL Draft Bible is the official scouting service provider of the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl and is used by all 32 NFL teams. Log on to NFLDraftBible.com and get your copy today. Back at it again. The 2020 NFL Draft Bible is now available. Nobody breaks it down like the Draft Bible. On location across the nation. We bring you exclusive access into the NFL draft world with over 600 scouting reports and nearly 200 player interviews. Real grades, projections, stats, and analysis you won't find anywhere else. Log on now and gain access to our PDF or order the hard copy. The only NFL draft book still in circulation. Used by all 32 NFL teams. We can't stop, we won't stop. NFLDraftBible.com.
All right, back at it again. Rick Saratella joined by John Murphy, David Turner, Ryan Roberts here, breaking it down, recapping the 2020 NFL draft, putting a ribbon on it. And, we are previewing the different divisions. We are hopping on some different guests, and we will go around the horn here, making sure. Okay, Mason Kinsey is our next guest. Coming up. Hey, it's live stream, baby. Relax. We got you covered. Ryan, I previewed that NFC West division right before the break there. We mentioned Arizona, this young up-and-coming team surrounding Kyler Murray with all these different parts. Seattle, they turned their roster over here on the fly, remained competitive. We saw the Rams become the third consecutive Super Bowl loser to not make the playoffs the following season. And then, of course, the San Francisco 49ers falling just short of a Super Bowl. How has this division evolved through the draft?
I mean, we talked about it a little yesterday, how teams allocate money into spots, how it kind of handicaps. If you want to hear a better word for it, maybe check John out on last night's show. But I think that the Rams added a bunch of good football players. Whether it's going to mesh well is the question.
They did?
I think they did. I mean, I like the players they got with their 4 or 5 first picks. I'm not sure it was the right players to help them get to where they need to be because they have questions on the offensive line. They have questions at linebacker, questions at edge. I'm not sure they filled the needs that they needed to early enough, but I do think they added some good football players. I'll say the Cardinals got Isaiah Simmons that fell into their lap with the 8th overall selection. That's a team that is going to be vastly improved. Obviously, we talked about DeAndre Hopkins in the offseason. Seattle Seahawks, they know their type in the draft. They always kind of beat to their own drum, but they are a consistent team that is going to win 10+ games, it seems, almost every year, be that potential playoff team. And San Francisco 49ers don't have a ton of draft capital this draft, but they still get Javon Kinlaw, they still get Brandon Ayuk, and they add Trent Williams, which is basically their third-round selection when you really think about it for next year. They gave up a fifth for this year as well. So they obviously improved in those areas. I think it's going to be a highly competitive division this year, especially at the top. We'll see how the Cardinals are able to improve, how much they do improve. Second year under Kingsbury, Kyler Murray into his second year. I think it should be a highly competitive division, and I'm just excited to see how it potentially unfolds, because, I mean, I can make an argument that 2 to 3 of those teams could be playoff teams, maybe the fourth if they have a drastic improvement. I think it's going to be an exciting division going into 2020.
I think these teams are evenly matched up, a lot closer than people realize. And, the Cardinals, almost every single one of their losses was in single digits by less than a touchdown. I mean, they could have won a lot more of those games, and I think next year they will evolve. And because of that, while San Francisco was a powerhouse, they might have some extra additional losses, which could cause them that home field advantage for next year's playoffs. All right. We have our next guest, Mason Kinsey from Berry College. I think he is on the line with us now. We love a good story of the underdog, a D3 talent invited to the East-West Shrine game. He signs with the Tennessee Titans. We're lucky to have him here on the NFL Draft Bible live stream show. We welcome him in now. Good morning, Mason. How are you? How does it feel to be a Tennessee Titan?
Feels great, man. I'm ready to go to work more than anything. Yesterday was a long day. Minutes felt like hours, but at the end of the day, I ended up where I think I was supposed to end up, and I'm ready to go.
All right, well, you're on the show here with Rick Saratella, John Murphy, David Turner, and Ryan Roberts. We'll go over to David with the first question.
Well, congratulations, Masons, first and foremost. I mean, becoming an NFL football player had to be a dream of yours growing up, and obviously. Tell me, what is it about the Titans that excites you the most to enter onto their roster?
I think just the last 4 spots on their depth chart at receiver. They got Corey Davis, A.J. Brown, Adam Humphries, obviously. But, looking at the depth past that, it's kind of wide open. And really, I didn't have – I had some places on my top 5 if I would have went undrafted that I had a feeling that I wanted to go to. But at the end of the day, I wanted to go to a place that I could make the roster. Money wasn't a priority to me. I want to play football. I love football. So, for me, I wanted to go to a place that I feel like I had the best chance to make a roster. And things really aligned. They didn't take a receiver, didn't add really any depth to their receiver chart. And they called me. I had a deal set up right at the end of the draft. So I was ready to go.
Smart decision. Let's go over to John with the next question.
Well, first off, this was a great idea by the Titans, mainly because I think for me, this is the best receiver not drafted.
Thank you.
Right, 547 receptions. That's what you're shooting for, because that's how many Danny Amendola has. And you look like him, you play like him, you sound like him. I don't know if you have, even go back and Google the haircut, and back in the day, and he came to the Texas vs. Nation All-Star game back then as, before guys like yourself became sort of trendy, and started that kind of that trend of. Being that type of guy. And if you look, the other smart thing is this is the kind of player the Titans have been trying to get, right? Because you look last 2 years, they've kind of used that UConn kid, Nick Williams, and they kept trying to use and find a guy like that to offset having those 2 big receivers on the outside. And now they have 2 different guys, there with Corey Davis and Brown. But if you look, the Titans have been looking for that next kind of guy. And I think that has a lot to do with their head coach and their GM, seeing how much success the guys like Amendola and Edelman had playing, in a similar offense in New England. So I think it's a very smart move on both sides for the Titans, to look at a guy like yourself, and then for you, to choose them. Did you have a vibe from the Shrine game till to then that the Titans were one of the teams that were most interested in you?
Yeah, they were in my top. I came up with the top 8 before the draft. So obviously some teams kind of knocked themselves out of the top 8 if I were to go undrafted. I honestly thought I was probably going to go in the 7th, just from the vibes that I've gotten from teams. And I've got calls that said I was on their draft boards. And talking to position coaches and having Zoom interviews and all those things. And I had top 30 visits set up before, all this COVID-19 stuff came out. But I personally thought I was going to go in the 7th sometime. And then I started seeing a lot of the Shrine players come off the board, and I was like, oh yeah, it's about to happen. But yeah, it was a perfect situation, man. God's plan's perfect, man. And it all worked out how it's supposed to go. So I have no complaints. I'm just ready to go to work.
You're bringing that nice Northeast accent with you to the Titans.
Yeah.
So were you how did you, because I saw a lot of videos, right, in terms of after the Shrine game, videos of your games and the highlights and stuff. Were you training somewhere specifically, with the workouts or a pro day idea? Like, where would you have done your pro day if everything had kind of played out naturally?
Yeah, so I actually got my pro day in, which like 99% of the people didn't. So I ended up having a pro day at Kennesaw State. The conditions weren't the best, so my numbers were kind of lower than what I was expecting because I had a junior day at West Georgia, and I went 4.47. I ran a 4.47 in the rain at West Georgia going into this. It was the spring of my junior year at Berry. So, I knew I was 4.4 speed, and I knew I could run. I was working out at Chip Smith Performance in Norcross. He's had 3,000 players going to the NFL, so. He really knows what he's been doing, man. I was working there with Jalen Hurts, DeAndre Overton from Clemson, Aaron Parker from Rhode Island, and like 4 or 5 more combine guys. So we were getting work in every day, man. It was awesome. And so after the Kennesaw State Pro Day, he ended up having a pro day at his facility as well. And I got to run indoors, like kind of control the conditions as far as weather and things like that. So I ended up running a 4.35 and a 4.37. There, my vert was like 37 inches. My broad jump was like 10.3. And then my shuttle, and I was 7 flat on the L cone and like 4.1 in the short shuttle. So putting up numbers that I honestly expected to do at Kennesaw State, but you can only control the controllables. So I was glad I got to get another shot at it, and I sent it out to all the teams so they got it pre-draft, and we're pretty accepting of it considering that nobody else was allowed to get a pro day either.
No doubt. Mason Kinsey, Berry College, here on the NFL Draft Bible live stream show. We're going around the horn. He's on the hot seat. Ryan Roberts up next with a question.
Mason, as the guys already said, big congratulations to you. I know we spoke briefly this morning about it. For me, this offseason has been so odd. We already mentioned that, with everything with the COVID and all the pro days being canceled. Luckily enough for you, you were a guy that got to the East-West. You had an opportunity to get eyes on you. You had some pro day opportunities, which is great. It seems like you've tackled this situation, because I know some people have been really overwhelmed. How do you feel that you've been able to navigate this tough draft process, and what are you potentially bringing to the Tennessee Titans? We talked about the speed that you bring, the production you have, but what specifically are you looking to bring to the Tennessee Titans organization?
Well, for me, Coach Robert Morris is a receivers coach. He called me about 15 minutes after the draft ended last night, and he's like, I know you're probably bummed out about not getting drafted, man, but we didn't pick a receiver. We're excited to have you. And, me and him had a good conversation. I said, hey, Coach, I just want to let you know, drafted or not, I'm going to be the hardest worker that you bring into that building. I'm going to be ready to work, and there's not going to be anybody that's going to outwork me that you bring in there. So for me, hard work and determination. I got a chip on my shoulder and always have. I feel like I've always been overlooked my entire life, and yesterday was just another example of that. And for me, I ended up going to Berry because I felt the love from Berry, and I felt like they gave me an honest opportunity to be great. And I felt the same vibe from the Titans. So my agent was like, hey, if you get a bigger offer from anybody, do you want me to let them know? And I said, no, I'm locked in. They're the first team to call me. And some of the teams that I thought I was going to go to later in the draft kind of went ghost. And I said, well, if this is the team that's going to believe in me, I'm going to prove them right. And my job's to prove everybody else wrong. So I got a big chip on my shoulder, man. And like I said, I'm just ready to go to work. I thought yesterday would be a lot more emotional day for me than anything. I didn't cry. I wasn't jumping around in the living room, nothing to that. I was just like, it's time to go. So for me, I'm going to be the hardest worker in the room, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to win.
No doubt. You seem ready to go right now, Mason. I'm curious. You said Berry College you knew was a great fit for you. Take us back on that journey coming out of high school. How do you land at Berry College? And then also, such a small percentage of players make the NFL as is. Almost none from D3 make it to that level. So when did you have an inkling that, like, hey, I might have a shot to play professionally here.
Yeah. So coming out of high school, my senior year, I got an offer from Mercer, which is D1AA. I say D1AA, but and Christmas break, my senior year, they called me and said, "Hey, we got a JUCO kid. Didn't think was going to get into the school. If he comes in, we're going to have to pull your offer, give you a preferred walk on. If he doesn't, your offer's still on the table." So they called me back 2 weeks later, and I was dead set I was going to go to Mercer. And they pulled my scholarship from me, and they gave me a preferred walk on. Kennesaw State gave me a preferred walk-on. Gardner-Webb had partial scholarships there. So I had a little bit of money at some of the smaller D1 schools. D2, I visited Shorter, which is also in Rome, Georgia. It's literally 3 miles away from Berry, and it's a D2. NAI schools, all that stuff. I actually, in my head, being a high school senior, that's very, coming from a place I didn't win a lot. I won 3 high school games in 4 years. I had 3 head coaches in 4 years. My high school team was not very good. And for me to say that I was going to go D1 was a big accomplishment in my city. And so, me being the hard-headed child I was back then, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm not going D3. I had a D1 offer on the table. So my mom was like, okay, look, like, just give it a chance, So it's 2.5 hours away from home. She said, we're going to go on this visit. We're going to see the coaches. You never know, you might like it. So it was my last visit. And I said, all right, let's do it. So got in the car, drove to Rome, met Coach K, the coaching staff. They had only been a program for 3 years. Didn't score an offensive touchdown for the first full football season. And then they went 3-7, and then they went 6-4. So he said, look, I got an interview with you for a work scholarship program, and it's going to allow you to pay for your school. You work a full-time job, 20 hours a week, fall and spring. And he said during the summer at D3 level, people go home just like regular students. So they don't stay over the summer and work out like D1 colleges do and take classes and all that. So I actually stayed on campus. Me and my brother both ended up receiving the Gate of Opportunity Scholarship, but ended up working 40 hours a week every summer while I was at Berry. So I worked a 9-to-5 job, and it helped me pay for school. So my package, I believe, before, I earned that scholarship was going to be $16,000 a year, and it basically turned it into a full ride. I think I paid $200 a semester, and they paid for my books, and I was going $52,000 a year to go to Berry. So that was a blessing. And we ended up winning 4 straight conference championships after that. I lost 1 game at home in 4 years, and went to the playoffs 3 out of the 4 years. So it was awesome, man. It was definitely the best choice for me by far.
That's a fantastic story, man. Hats off to you. Congratulations once again for all that hard work paying off here. And before we let you go, any message you want to give to those Tennessee Titan fans? Any shout outs or thank yous?
Yeah, man. Thank you just to the coaching staff and to the fans. Just know you're going to get the hardest worker in the room. I'm going to bring competitive spirit to every single day, every single drill. And I'm ready to win it. I'm ready to win a championship. Let's bring a championship back to Nashville, and let's get to work.
All right. Well, hey, we thank you, Mason. Best of luck. I know we'll be chatting here hopefully before the season. So get ready, man. We're looking forward to it.
Yes, sir. Tighten up.
All right, there you go. That man is ready. He is Mason Kinsey. That is Berry College, and the program just 3 years in existence. No wonder why I was saying, hey, where the heck is this Berry College? And then, we all discovered when he got that invite to the East-West Shrine game, and our guy Joe Everett was down there with boots on the ground saying, hey, this wide receiver from Berry is making plays all over the place, and his next destination will now be in Tennessee. All right. Rick Saratella, John Murphy, David Turner, Ryan Roberts here on the NFL Draft Bible live stream. We ran through the NFC divisions and kind of recapped the overview of what they've done here leading up to the 2020 season. And we'll shift gears now over to the AFC, John. We talked about the New England Patriots for the first time ever. Well, not ever. It seems like for the first time ever, but for the first time in about 20 years, it won't be Tom Brady. And the division is up for grabs. So is Buffalo primed here to make a play with some of their offseason acquisitions? They're drafting the Jets. Obviously, we talked about Joe Douglas trying to turn around the program. And you also have who else is in the mix there? Miami, who is obviously on the rebuild, but boy, oh boy, did they add a slew of players. So how do you feel the division shapes up as we emerge from the draft? Bill Belichick saying, hey, it's by design. that we didn't sign a quarterback. Is it going to be Stidham? Will it be Hoyer? Could it be Cam Newton? Or is the quarterback of the New England Patriots not on the roster yet?
Yeah, I kind of was trying to think about that, throughout the draft, and then, basically, again last night and this morning. If the Patriots are just really so forward thinking that in reverse of what Miami, and what their fans were saying last year with the tank for Tua, and how the San Antonio Spurs, kind of lucked into the one time in 20 years that, David Robinson played, or 12, 15 years, and he gets hurt, and the following year you get Tim Duncan, for a 20-year run that they've had, and you just kind of stick to your plan, and you still let the veteran guys go when you think their time is up. And unlike, think about the NFL and how stubborn the NFL is in general, but yet Bill Belichick and the Patriot way that is supposed to be that rigid and stubborn let Tom Brady go rather than give in, traded Gronkowski the minute he said he wanted back in, and said, well, I ain't coming back there. You know where I'm going. They just relented and trade. I mean, look how long it took Trent Williams to get traded. And look how long it's taken some of these other guys. I mean, basically the kid in Jacksonville is basically trying to bombard people on social media. Gronkowski didn't even have to say please. He just said, I want to come back, and got traded. Right? I mean, so if you think about it, they might just be that damn shrewd to look at it and say, hey, you know what? Hoyer knows our system. Okay, he hasn't had the career Fitzpatrick has had, but he's had those little stretches of 5-6 games where, it's doable and not just awful football. You have a kid with the skills that Stidham has, and he looked good in the preseason last year, which, again, it's only preseason football. But first off, it's not a competition in this division until they get beat. Until we're sitting there in December and someone else has qualified for the playoffs, it's not a competition yet, right? Because all they've done is even out the possibilities. Because you still have, McDermott, who is a rising coach, I believe, very sound. But you still have, Flores, who's in the process of developing but showed good signs. And the Jets, well, they made some good picks.
Yeah.
And they have Le'Veon Bell. But Crazy Eye still has to prove that he can actually win anything. So to me, until the Patriots are done, they're not done until, that someone else is standing there over them, in that division. And like I said, the most interesting scenario in all this is I joked about the Broncos saying, like, hey, they either did a lot of good work for Drew Lock, or they have a lot of good pieces in place for who they'll draft a quarterback next year. And if you're the Patriots and you stand fit and you just play this season with what you have, you still could have a competitive season. And if not, are you telling me that the Patriots could literally play one season minus Tom Brady and then be so fortunate to fall into a draft that may have Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, and others in it? Wouldn't that just be something that would fit? Wouldn't it just be, right for the Patriots to suddenly be sitting there next year in the top 3 in the draft and then run off another 10-year, bonanza? So I think they have their plan, and obviously we could find out this afternoon that they're signing Cam Newton, right after Jameis Winston, but clearly they have a plan and they stuck to it. Their draft shows it. The 2 tight ends, going for a wild card guy that sort of has that poor man Isaiah Simmons, Derwin James kind of look to his game, the versatility of what they'll do with Kyle Duggar, not surprising. You mentioned it. Miami really stuck to their game plan. 3 offensive linemen, 3 big mamma jammas there. Austin Jackson, who has a high ceiling as a 20-year-old, come back with Robert Hunt will be tried at right tackle. Then Solomon Kindle. I mean, they got 1,000 pounds there, of draft. And even when you look at the later picks, Curtis Weaver, perfect as a situational type pass rusher. Even a kid like Malcolm Perry, that'll be a high compete guy, and can be on a practice roster and develop into a guy, as kind of an all-purpose, jack of all trades, type player. I really like what Buffalo did in terms of the type of guys they got, right? They fit right in their mold of what they're looking for. The kid like Moss, he doesn't have, Frank Gore's pedigree, obviously, but he does have a good football pedigree as he's cousins to Santana and Sonoris Moss, and gives you another between the tackles guy there that now you have kind of him and Singletary together, gives them a nice 1-2 punch with Yeldon on top of it. They're not going to be shy for carries, and I think helps Josh Allen, continue to develop. So all of those teams, and then here come the Jets, and a lot of their picks we talked about have high athletic ceilings. And the Jets, I think, all of a sudden can start making a move towards us being able to know at season's end what kind of quarterback Sam Darnold is. I think we have a much better chance of knowing what that is at season's end now versus what they had kind of going into it and kind of where you had no idea what they were really doing at multiple times there, with things. Those are a lot more steady picks in terms of you can see Mims in the same role as, Brashad Perryman in a year. Becton comes in and immediately legitimizes their offensive line. The pass rusher kid is a better player on film than the guys they've been drafting, as pass rushers. P. Ryan is a almost perfect fit to tag team with Le'Veon Bell. He's a better receiver than you think out of the backfield and a tougher runner for his size. So I think most of the teams in that division would get, A- kind of B+ grades for their draft. And it should be a much highly more competitive division than it's been in terms of the middle pack. You shouldn't just be able to go, and beat those teams, like they have. But to me, until the Patriots get knocked out, it's the Patriots, and then we'll see what everybody else does. But if I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, I'm saying, my hands up first because we're going to have the first shot at them.
I would agree with that. And, I went on New York radio yesterday morning and the fans are up over arms. And shout out to the New York fans for being educated and being irate over a 3rd-round pick. I mean, they were just so pissed off that they used the 3rd-round pick on a safety because they're saying, hey, we got Marcus May and Jamal Adams, like the best young safety tandem doing in the league, and we're using a 3rd-round pick on Ashton Davis. So I try to go on and make sense of it, talk about the versatility, talk about the special teams aspect. But I like the Jets picks. I do think Buffalo is the next kind of team up there on the chopping block, and Miami's still another year away at least. And boy, oh boy, you mentioned about the possibility if Trevor Lawrence goes to the Patriots, I mean, we're gonna be stuck with Bill Belichick till he's like 75 years old.
I think the one thing, and it's very hard for especially the fans and the local media, and the national media doesn't care because they don't pay attention to it. But sometimes it's hard to not or to forget about. In terms of like Arizona trades for Hopkins and people still wanted him to take a receiver, but they forget that they got, the Butler kid sitting there from last year, right? Normally the most forgotten guys are the guys that were taken high the year before that didn't yet produce, that those teams are hoping that's their production value. And I think guys like Ashton Davis, J.K. Dobbins, also the running back, A.J. Dillon in Green Bay, those are picks in my mind where the GM is looking at having his cap person sit next to him during the draft, poking him, under the table about, hey, Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams next year, like that ain't happening. Is Marcus May, is May and Jamal Adams both going to be there with the Jets long-term? We don't know for sure that either of them are, but for sure we know they both probably are not going to be able to be there, long-term. So I think a lot of those type picks, when you see them, have a lot more to do with the future salary cap and where teams see them spending their money. I think those are kind of more precursors to what comes next, in terms of the next year or two, next 12 to 18 months, because you're always going to judge that when you're drafting, just like you're judging the quarterback class, right? I think the Packers, when they did that with Jordan Love, see themselves as Super Bowl contenders, even if they're not a 13-3 team on paper, but they see themselves as Super Bowl contenders. and you look at next year's draft and you know that the high-end quarterbacks are going to be guys gone within the top 20. So to get Jordan Love at 26 makes a lot more sense if you're thinking we're going to be 26 or lower next year in the first round. We're not getting anywhere near those type quarterbacks again next year. So to make that trade now and not have to give up the farm to get them, I think is part of the explanation of why those kind of moves get made.
Yeah, and just the last point on the Jets safety thing. I mean, the Patriots have always been stacked at safety. If you want to emulate who you're chasing, whether it's McCourty, Daron Harmon, Patrick Chung, Ty Law, the list goes on and on. They've always had depth at the safety position. Yeah. So,
well, and the other thing that won't go away is, the Cowboys did not, draft a guy that instantly comes to mind to make you think that the Cowboys' interest in Jamal Adams has changed.
Correct. Well,
so to me, that's not going to go away the same way that, if you look at the draft, okay, Marquise Goodwin at the end of the draft gets traded. But to me, there's still, DJ Moore, which would be a surprise trade, but it's not out of the question. Sure. Curtis Samuel, almost likely Curtis Samuel gets dealt at some point. Christian Kirk is another guy that clearly could be on the block and get traded. And then, of course, the biggest name, is now that the Vikings sort of maybe made their receiver decisions, if they're off the bandwagon, could the Packers be a team that could jump on the, Odell Beckham bandwagon, in terms of a trade partner? It is a possibility. And any one of those four guys could get traded, and at least two of them would give Aaron Rodgers a high-end receiver, to start off with next season.
No doubt about it. Rick Saratella, John Murphy, David Turner, Ryan Roberts breaking it down. We've got another guest, I believe, on deck coming up at 11:50. We'll have Christian Roseboom. But let's go over to the AFC North, David. It's been a two-horse race here between Baltimore and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh obviously losing Big Ben last year, failing to make the playoffs. We've talked about the exciting draft that Baltimore had, arguably the best. We'll find out in about 5 years from now. The Bengals obviously rebuilding with a new program there. Joe Burrow, at least a year or two away before they can take that next step and to be a contender. Do the Cleveland Browns find their way into the dance party here, or is it still Baltimore 1A and Pittsburgh 1B?
Well, I'll say I think Baltimore and Eric, what he did there in this draft actually makes them the solid one. Pittsburgh, they had a good draft, but they didn't move the chain like Baltimore did. I mean, what Baltimore did in this year's draft, I mean, you could see like the thought process. It was methodical. He was loading up defense, offense. He had a plan. He executed it. Even the late picks with the offensive linemen out of Michigan and Mississippi State, and then coming back and getting the Texas Tech kid and the Iowa safety late. They're all good programs, good kids, good valid picks. And again, I don't think Baltimore, as John, you alluded to yesterday, has a lot of space to make room because their roster is pretty deep already as is. But these players that Eric went and targeted and went and got are going to solidify a very deep roster already, in my opinion. So I think Baltimore really moved the change in their favor yesterday. Pittsburgh had a solid draft. I think they're the number 2 team still, clearly. I think it's going to be those games are going to be fun for years to come to watch those two teams battle out that division. As far as Cincinnati after the first pick, I don't really ever see a plan with Cincinnati, and they're staying true to that. So, for them, I don't like everybody they picked. I don't see a plan and how they fit. When Carolina drafted, you saw hey, we have to fix the defense. We're just taking all defense. Screw it. Marty was on saying that it wasn't the plan. It just fell that way. But they stuck to a plan, which was we need to fix the defense. There was concise agreement with him and the coaches to execute that kind of plan. In Cincinnati, I don't see that. I thought we saw with Cleveland, they had a good plan with getting some offensive line help early and then coming back later. The Nick Harris pick at center I love. I think this kid's a nasty athletic player who's very quick off the ball. If he would have probably tested better, and I think he's got a little medical. If I'm wrong on that, correct me. But I think he's a player that could have went a little higher as well. So I really like what Cleveland did in this draft. We're not going to see the effects of that right away, in my opinion. I think that's going to take a little time for this to groom. So maybe a year, another solid draft next year for Cleveland. They'll move the chains their way. But to me, this draft really solidified what Baltimore is going to be, and that's going to be the leader of this division coming, because they have the young quarterback. They have talent now around them on offense and on defense. They have a great defensive mind and offensive defensive coordinators there. So Baltimore really solidified their stakes in that division as a leader. Pittsburgh, I love them. I love what they do. They chop wood, but they just did not come in and swing a heavy hammer in this draft.
Yeah, I would agree with those sentiments. And you look at the Bengals, notoriously known for cutting corners in their scouting departments and paying and hiring scouts. No surprise that they don't have a distinct game plan. And I would agree. I think the Ravens right now, they're on a crash collision course to meet up with Kansas City in the AFC Championship. If you were to put a gun to my head right now, those are the top two teams in the AFC that I see. Ryan, let's move over to the AFC South, which, this was a fun bunch of teams to keep tabs on during the draft. You had the Vrabel house, as fun as it gets there in Tennessee, and Bill O'Brien losing a gasket there with his debacle trade, last second debacle trade, the NFL or ESPN camera crew capturing that. We talked about Chris Ballard and the wonderful work they did there in Indianapolis, and something that Dave brought up earlier in the show is the tremendous draft. I thought Jacksonville, I went and looked at their draft and I said, man, they really did some work here. So I thought the Colts were primed to make a run before the Andrew Luck injury, but somehow, some way, it seems like Bill O'Brien, all he does is win that division and get into the playoffs every year. And then, of course, we saw the run that the Titans had in Jacksonville just a couple years ago. So again, very a lot of parity in this division here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking at the Indianapolis Colts. I feel like top to bottom, that is a really talented roster. We saw Jacoby Brissett start off pretty well last year, got hurt, fizzled obviously extremely to the middle of the season, to the end. If Phillip Rivers can give them a consistent element, and, Phillip Rivers was not the best version of himself last year, but if he can take it up a notch just from what they had last year, I think Indianapolis is a real player in the AFC. I think that they're a playoff contending team. I think that they can definitely make that run. We saw what they were a couple years ago. They have a nice roster, continue to build it through the draft. I felt like they had a very solid draft overall. Texans, man, it's becoming very odd with Bill O'Brien down there, what this offseason has brought. I didn't love the draft. I don't know if they take a huge step back, but if they were a team that ends up slipping to not being a playoff team to winning 7 to 8 games, I would not be incredibly surprised despite having Deshaun Watson there. That roster construction is just a mess right now with how Bill O'Brien's running it this offseason. Jacksonville, like you said, I felt like they had a very solid draft. They brought on some nice players. We talk about a couple of the guys that they were able to get throughout, and I feel like they're becoming very fast on defense for a defense that has needed it. We talked about Yannick Ngakoue leaving. They got some athletic pieces to add over there. The question, obviously the answer, I guess, for at least for the short term, is Gardner Minshew is the guy, at least for this year. Let's see how that kind of runs itself out. I know he showed a lot in the
Did we lose Ryan? I think. Okay. No, you're back.
I was just saying. Okay, cool. I was just saying I felt like I felt like they may be a player in this quarterback class this year. They showed that they did not have a lot of interest. They're rolling with Gardner, seeing what it runs out there. And the Tennessee Titans, I love what Mike Vrabel's building there. And, Cole McDonald with the last pick to sit behind Tannehill. Let's see what happens there. I love to see it, at least in preseason. But Tennessee Titans, I think, are the class of that division right now. And I think the Indianapolis Colts are going to fight with them tooth and nail for that. I really do think that the Houston Texans are going to take a step back this year, probably to the third team in that division. And let's see moving forward, what Jacksonville can build there, if Gardner's the guy, or if they are heavy in the tank for Trevor or loose for Lawrence, the sweepstakes next year.
Yeah, it's amazing the lack of depth behind Minshew. They've got Joshua Dobbs, and they drafted Jake Luton, who we had at the NFLPA Bowl coming off of an injury. So I'll throw it over. Let's recap this AFC West before our final guest. And David, I know you spent some time with the Raiders. So much like Jacksonville, when I look at the AFC West, specifically the Raiders, I see a collection of talent, a team, building process, but kind of, again, no answer at quarterback. The Chargers found their answer, or they hope, at quarterback with Justin Herbert. The Broncos believe they found their quarterback with Drew Lock. The Chiefs obviously have the best quarterback. So is any of these teams able or ready to compete with the Chiefs after the draft?
Well, I think the Raiders will start there. They found the answer to their quarterback issue by drafting 3 receivers. That's what they
still got to get it to him, though.
Hey, Derek Carr is honestly, to me, he's a great young gun. He's a guy who can get the ball out with some time. He's got a young tight end there, and now look what they went and got. One of the fastest receivers, proven guy in Ruggs, come back with a Kentucky kid, and then the big tall kid Edwards out of South Carolina. So they went and said, hey, you know what? We got our guy. We just don't have enough playmakers around our guy to help him out, to get open, to stretch the field, to create good, clear, and defined passing lanes for our guy to fit balls into. We are asking our guy to do too much. And they corrected that. They really did by getting him some weapons. Found late with John Simpson, a guard out of Clemson, some protection help there. I mean, yeah, the Raiders are Clemson West, as we said. Yeah. I mean, it's like if you go to Clemson, you're going to be a Raider. That's just the way this is going. But again, it's working for them. It really is. And I think what they did is they improved that receiver core with young talent that they're going to stay off the market for years to come and have to pay a big name wide receiver to come there and play with these young kids. I really like the young kids they took. Yes, Kansas City, they are the top of that division. The speed they have, the way they replenish, they obviously have a plan. I think, like I said, that's a coach-run team. You saw a coach take the pieces that he needed to be successful in this draft. They fit his system, not fit every system. So I think they're going to stay at the top of the division right now. But what the Raiders are doing, I see them building to try to beat and move up in the division. Denver, to me, had probably one of their best drafts. I don't know what happened there. I don't know who came out of a closet or got on the table, but I mean, look what they got. Judy and they got Hamler to go with Locke and what he was doing last year. They get the Missouri tight end late at 118, who to me was a great weapon. I don't know why he was there that late. The offensive line got a new center there. One of my favorite players, the LSU kid. So, and even late, they got a receiver in Cleveland that has great upside. So you see that what Denver did in this draft, they really are trying to make a move for the number 2 spot behind Kansas City, and they might be there. The Raiders could be there. I mean, you just don't know where. I think it's got way more competitive, especially with the moves in the offseason that some of these teams did, bringing in players. I mean, Denver's been one of the most active teams of this division to improve their roster and depth in their roster. So whatever's going on there, that mixologist is starting to get it right. That drink, I'm starting to get that Kool-Aid taste in my mouth. and it's hard for a Raider guy to say that about Denver. But they definitely are getting it right. So, or they're starting to get it right, I should say. The mix is starting to come together. Kansas City is clearly the top. Raiders are in the hunt. So, for me, I just don't know. Yeah, I love what this division starting to become. I really am. I think it's very competitive division is starting to get there where it needs to be. So.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the tight ends there with Alberto pairing up with Noah Fant, and I mean, it's exciting. We might see some more rap cameo appearances from Drew Lock with all the excitement there on the sidelines this upcoming season. So, we've got a few minutes to mess around with here. If we get Christian Rosenboom, we'll pop him up. Otherwise, we'll kind of put a ribbon on this 2020 draft process. We'll be kicking off our 2021 draft coverage very soon. And make sure you log on to the NFLDraftBible.com. If you're watching here on the All Access Football Network channel on YouTube, we'll have continuous streams. We've got a lot of exciting announcements that I can't really make just yet. But 2021 is going to be our greatest season ever. I can guarantee you. And 2020 was a phenomenal work and accomplishment, just putting 622 scouting reports, 182 player interviews into the book. We will be bigger, better, and better next year. That's my word. John, any final thoughts here as we wind down the 2020 draft cycle? It's been a fun 365 days here.
Yeah, no doubt. I think the thing about it now is, the process to get here in 2020, went from a very normal cycle right to the combine, and then everything literally changed within a month of the combine. Now we're going to be entering, like basically next week or Monday morning when teams get to their home offices. How do they try to start up the 2021 cycle when all of this is still upon us, right? That's going to be a very interesting scenario to say, hey, it's clear, different teams have taken different approaches to the undrafted free agents, different approaches to what kind of guys they're signing or drafted. How do you now augment that moving forward to say, if you feel like you missed on things, if you feel like your scouting fell off in the last 6 or 8 weeks and it contributed to the type of draft you had, how will these teams now look at their scouting departments and what you can or cannot do? Because it's one thing to say that you created virtual pro days. It's a whole other thing to say you can't do any virtual scouting if there's no, fall practices and there's no summer activities and there's a question mark of when the college football season, actually starts. That's going to put a lot of different components into effect. If college scouts don't have road trips to make until 2021, that means a lot of film work is going to be done, off of your junior and sophomore film. And then how does it approach to see, is there a chance that we might see, an overwhelming number, of guys starting to try to declare for a supplemental draft? Or like Russ mentioned the other day, yeah, they're all going to just sit tight because you don't want to get stuck in this rookie pool of things unless the NFL has to adjust to their schedule as well. So we could see a very interesting 2021, scouting process. Number one, when does it start? How does it start? And are we going to be watching basically past film to get a read on guys? And then it could lead to a number of guys either falling through the cracks or rising to the surface, quickly during the season because things could be kind of all disproportionate.
Yeah, when we departed Indianapolis for the combine, we had no idea what we were headed for in the month of March. And now the waters remain murky, David. We talked about at the top of the show the importance and value of Blesto and National and how much these teams do lean on that, at least for a starting point. We don't have that this year. And if there is a season that starts in February and it runs through June, we don't know how that draft circuit looks like. When is the combine? When is the all-star games? Does the draft get shaken, pushed back? Does the season get pushed back? So much uncertainty, to John's point, but over to you, David, for your parting shot here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're going to be, navigating by stars in scouting right now. I mean, it's back to, there's no roadmaps because like you said, Bledsoe National usually every spring are able to go onto campuses and meet with kids, measure them, get their questionnaires so you can contact the kid, get background on the kids, get a head start for all these teams. And like you just said, that's not there. Gone. Because kids aren't on campus and you're not going to get it. So where's the starting list? Teams like New England that's been doing it their way and Atlanta that are independents. I think Denver's another independent. All New England chains, they have a better idea of what to do right now than these other teams. And also, if there's a team out there that is actually thinking about furloughing or not hiring up or staffing up their college scouting departments right now, they're asinine, 100% asinine. Because next year, if the college can play a condensed season, right, your big scouts have to be at the big games, but those big games are going to be happening every weekend all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, you have less time to scout players and get body reads, get types, get into schools. So this is a time when most businesses are thinking, how do I cut spending to be successful? I think the NFL and their scouting departments need to figure out, hey, how much can I really spend to be on top of this? How many guys can I employ? Is it 10, 12, maybe 15? And then after that's done next year, maybe you then staff back or you come back a little bit. But for the next year or two, you would hope that enough people that are been in this business long enough know they have to staff up because they don't know what's coming for next year. And if you don't have a college season start till the spring, what are you going to do about kids that say, hey, the NFL, are you going to move your draft? Because if you don't move your draft, I'm declaring for the draft. I'm not playing the college season. There's no reason for me to play the college season. If I'm going to be drafted in May, I don't need to play a college season that ends in June, So there's a lot of unknowns in these murky waters that are going, and how they respond is going to be interesting to see over the next 30 to 60 days. But I've heard a lot of teams get scared about, the scouts are getting scared about being furloughed or let go. And I'm like, that would be such a mistake. You have the connections, you have the roadmaps of what's going on in those colleges. If they don't pay you right now and you go away, and then maybe some other team takes advantage and starts hiring and staffing up, now whoever lets you go is in such a weaker position when the market does rebound. One show that I'm all over right now is Billions, and it's all about positioning, right? And it's all about what's the market, play the short, this and that. Right now, you can't play a short. You got to play a long game because college football is going to come back. And if you don't have the scouts ready to pounce when it does come back, and they're not trained, like John was saying earlier, if they're not trained in your system, they don't know what your coaches want, they don't know what you're going with. Now you're playing from behind, because not only are you trying to get the scouting reports in, but you're trying to train people at the same time, while the whole time you're trying to run a season, because we don't know what the NFL season is going to look like. That's way too many moving parts. Right now, what you can consolidate and control, is the scouts. Hire the scouts, train the scouts right now while you have time to train them. Get a cohesive voice in the room so everybody is understanding what they're looking for. And then once it's time to unleash the fury of, hey, college is going to happen in these 8 weeks, we can get from D2 to D3 to FCS to major college football all scouted in these next weeks, then you're ready to pounce. If you staff down and think you're going to pounce later and you're going to save a couple dollars right now, it's $1 billion industry. Let's never forget that. This is not a mom and pop shop. This is not some little local liquor store that needs to close up. This is $1 billion. Every team is worth $4 to $5 billion. They can afford to pay scouts their $6,500, $1,000 checks to sit at home and grade tape.
Yeah, NFL teams, if you're listening, pay attention, because the gap between what coaches are paid and what scouts are paid it's just unnecessary. It doesn't make any sense, because the scouts are the one here building your team. They're just as important, if not more important, than your coaches. Listen to the men who know. John Murphy, David Turner, Ryan Roberts here. I think we have Christian Roseboom here to wrap things up on the show. NFLPA Bowl invite. It's good to see you again here, Christian. Congratulations. You're another player. We had Ernest Edwards from Maine going to LA, and you're another player joining that West Coast journey to join the Rams. Congratulations. How does it feel, my man?
Thank you. It feels good. It was a whirlwind of emotions, and I was exhausted. It was a long day, and at the end I got an opportunity, and that's all that matters.
A long couple months, I'm sure. And you're on the horn here. Rick Saratella, John Murphy, David Turner, and Ryan Roberts, who's going to kick it off with this first question.
Yeah, Christian, it's great to talk to you again, man. I hope everything's well, family-wise, health-wise right now. It's something, because I'm looking, I know when this decision as an undrafted guy comes into effect, you're looking at depth charts. And when I look at the LA Rams, obviously they lost Corey Littleton this offseason. They have Micah Kaiser coming back, but there's a lot of uncertainty in that linebacker core. How much did that uncertainty and what other factors went into your decision to ultimately pick the LA Rams?
Yeah, like you said, the roster situation. I mean, that's the biggest deal for me. And my agent's really good about doing the roster breakdowns and just finding the best situation for me to succeed at. And once it came down to it, it was of the offers I had, it was the best one based on what other people had drafted, what other people already had in place. So at the end of the day, I'm excited to get out there and whenever that may be.
Let's go over to David with the next question.
This draft, we saw a really intimate view into the homes of all the draft picks and sharing it with their families. What was this like for you and your family going not only through the day yesterday and picking, but the whole process from your senior year through? I think that's something that this draft's brought more to us than any other draft prior to it. What was that like for you and your family?
I mean, it was pretty intimate as far as just my family and a couple of buddies. But yeah, they've been there the whole time. So it was fun to have that day with them. But without getting drafted, it was kind of a weird, I don't know. They were excited for me, obviously. And I was excited to be having an opportunity because a lot of guys are wishing they had an opportunity. But yeah, they're very supportive throughout it all. Probably wasn't as fun of a reaction, I guess, is what a lot of these guys had, but they're very excited for me and I'm very excited to be out there.
We're excited to have you go out there. I mean, it's going to be exciting to see what you bring to the table for them and watch you make the team as an undrafted guy and be one of these great stories, when you put on the gold jacket later in your career. And, you could say, hey, it started with the Corona draft and that motivated me and got me to where I'm at. I think you're a hell of a linebacker, and what you're going to bring to the table for them is going to be very unique. So I can't wait for training camp to open up for me to come watch you because that will be one of the teams I go see.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Like I said, I'm super excited. It's kind of the same journey I had in high school. I mean, I only had one Division I offer. I've kind of gone through this, and so yeah, I'm used to this situation, kind of with the chip on your shoulder type of thing, and I'm ready to get to work.
Well, hey, if you don't know John Randall, go Google that, man, because I was up there in Canton at the Hall of Fame this past year, had a chance to talk to John Randall, and he goes from undrafted free agent to the Hall of Fame. So hopefully you could be the next person to do that. We'll go over to John with the next question.
Yeah, that leads me into a perfect stat that I was holding on to, and now's a good time as any to use it. Later on this summer, when they do have this year's Hall of Fame class, it will now mean there are more undrafted free agents in the Hall of Fame than former first-round draft picks.
Wow.
It's a good one.
Which is, yeah,
right?
That's not.
And I know it's difficult, right? Because it's not something we can ever turn the clock back on the last couple of days. But there is not a shadow of a doubt that if this process had gone the normal way, that you would have heard your name, right? In my opinion, it's a great fit. You look Corey Littleton, right? Undrafted free agent. You look at how
Right.
they, what they do and what kind of game, you play. It's an unfair, thing to kind of put on you, as a young player. But Laurinaitis, who had a great career with them, played like his ass was on fire. And it seems like even though you were playing up there in the cold, that seems like the same way that you play, football.
Yeah, for sure.
And you can tell that, it really shows somebody's character, that the disappointment that I see is less about yourself and more about the people who care about you. That getting drafted was not for you. It was more for all the people that have supported you. And guys that have that kind of character and bring that to a locker room, it really makes normally the ceiling that they have for their career, it's a lot easier for them to meet because it was never about the things that aren't important. At the end of the day,
sure.
having a pro football career, no one's going to really ever ask you, well, where did you get drafted? And when you do get to say, this is what I did, or this is where I came from, it's a lot more fulfilling than just having it kind of fall all into play. So I wish you the best of luck. And I think it's a great, it's a great strategy. Who's your agent and what kind of conversations were you having yesterday to select the Rams? Because much like the kid we talked to earlier, like I said, with Corey Littleton and the success that they've had, with kind of guys in linebacker and DBs that are, kind of lesser known or later round free agent guys, it's an excellent fit to go there.
Yeah. So thank you, by the way. I appreciate that. But my agent is Chris Giddings. And he's had a lot of my former teammates, and they went the same route. I think he's really good at kind of being in that free agent situation at the end. And he knew he had a game plan going into the day, and we were talking throughout what teams were doing, what we thought would be a best fit for me. And so he was talking to teams, obviously seeing what they were saying. And as soon as it got done, we knew that the Rams were the best situation for me, and just went with it, just went all in. And I think if you could look at all the teams and think of the what ifs, that's not going to do you any good at this point. So just kind of jumping all in on one team. And because it wasn't about the money either, the signing bonus, that's peanuts compared to a contract, making a team. And so we didn't even, we kind of looked at that a little bit, but for the most part, we pretty much disregarded that and just found the best fit for me. So
that's okay. If you want to, you can just tell Chris to send that check over to us.
Absolutely. No, it'll help.
On a serious note, when you do talk to him, let him know that we're thinking about him. I know he's had a difficult couple of weeks there and had a family loss. So it kind of shows the character of the person you picked as an agent to be able to stay on top of things, even while dealing with the things he's been dealing with off the field.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Well, Christian, to John's point, you're going to get an opportunity because once you get into camp, they're not going to care if you came from South Dakota State or South Korea. The best man is going to win. So we're running out of time here. We got time for one last question. We'll go over to Ryan for the closer.
Yeah, Christian, I mean, kind of what Rick said, South Dakota State, I know you guys are a proud tradition, one of the best programs on the FCS level. You're going to a team now, had a down year, a lot of injuries, 9-7, but just 2 years ago, they're in the Super Bowl, and a couple plays here and there. Maybe there's a different result, but now you're going over to the Rams. Just kind of give a preview to any LA Rams supporters, fans listening on what they should expect from you the moment that you eventually get out there.
Yeah, like you said, when I do get out there, I'm all in, and I'm not going to California to see the sights. I'm going to play football. And I've only been to California once. So I think it'll be good to have a Midwest kind of mindset going in there, just a blue collar work ethic. I'm not about the flashy stuff. I'll just get stuff done and work hard and make a team and make a difference on the team, no matter what that is. Just being a great special teams player. Obviously I know that's huge, and hopefully coming into a role that's a bit larger in the next couple of years.
All right, Christian. Well, hey, we appreciate you hopping on here and spending a few minutes and catching up again. So parting shot to the people out there, anything you want to tell the Rams fans, any thank yous or shout outs you want to give before we let you go?
I'm excited. Got to give them a shout out. I think Rams fans, I don't know much about him. I'm excited to get to know him. I know you got a lot of Rams fans now in Iowa and South Dakota. So I'm excited to continue to grow that fan base out here and bring it out to California. So.
Well, keep it cranking, brother. You got a lot of good people in your corner. We're all supporting and rooting for you, and we're excited to see where your career takes you. So be in touch and stay strong, my man. Be safe out there.
For sure. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. Christian Roseboom, South Dakota State, bringing us home here on the NFL Draft Bible live stream show. We've been talking to John Murphy, David Turner, and Ryan Roberts. Of course, I am Rick Saratella. We're going to put a ribbon on our last show of the 2020 cycle. Our next show will be all about 2021. And before we wrap things up, we got to get a parting shot in from our scouting coordinator here at the NFL Draft Bible, Ryan Roberts.
Yeah, just kind of what the guys were speaking about a little bit before Christian hopped on is we're going to see very quickly in this ever-changing world, moving forward here, because we talked about kind of yesterday, the war rooms, like pounding the table for guys, how it has to be such a unified scouting department, it has to be such a unified organization. Moving forward, it's equally as important. I think it's paramount moving forward. We talk about getting those lists, understanding the targets, understanding a plan of action. It's going to be paramount for the next few weeks, for the next few months. I'm excited for it. Just wrapping a bow on 2020. It was a pleasure to be able to just look at this class for the depth, for the quality. I'm excited for 2021. I thank all you guys for, being a part of it, John and David, and being able to learn from people that have been in the industry for so long. It was honestly a pleasure. And we talked a little bit earlier about, sticking to your guns. I think one thing that's been important for me is I trust my eyes, and I feel like sometimes people look at you and say like, oh, that's not what what some scouts think or whatever. But like, I work very hard doing what I do. I believe in what I believe, but at the same extent, having guys like John and David and being able to consistently learn, and Rick and just all the people I've been around, it's about continuing to learn, to continue to get better at your craft, but also understanding what you're confident in knowing and what you trust in what your eyes can see.
Yeah, no doubt. And, I will say I've learned a lot just hosting these shows all week long. The experts that we've had on throughout the week, not only John Murphy and David Turner and Ryan Roberts, but also Russell Landy and Dane Vandernat and Von Hutchins. And if you add up all the years of scouting experience, we brought well over a century of scouting experience.
That was Ron Hill.
Yeah. Ron Hill. Ron Hill's got 40 years in the game alone, So, hey, we brought a lot of areas of expertise from different angles, from a GM perspective, from a scouting perspective, from an overall draft process perspective. And, hey, this is what we do here at the NFL Draft Bible. Since 2002, we are going to put out our NFL Draft recap. So, log on to NFLDraftBible.com if you want to download that. You can still get the Draft Bible PDF if you didn't. If you want to get caught up to speed on all these guys, we have a great 50% discount promo for you, VIP 50. And, follow us on Twitter at NFL Draft Bible. We've been sending out tweets throughout all these shows and during this show right here. So if you want to go hop on and follow all these guys and catch up with all their analysis between now and next year's draft in 2021, where hopefully we'll be in Cleveland breaking it all down for you with that 100-year anniversary of Canton and the Hall of Fame starting in August. And then, well, we don't know when it's going to start. If it's going to be in August, we don't know where it's going to end. If it's going to be in July or April or who knows. But I will say this. The most watched NFL draft of all time. It was much needed. And, shout out to the NFL Network and the ESPN for coming together, bringing us a production. Shout out to our guy, Dakota Follett, all week long for producing these shows along with Samantha and making it all happen. And we've got as good as a team here as there is, period. Including all 32. We've got 6,000 players in our database for 2021 already. We're talking to the pro liaisons and the coaches and trying to provide those preseason lists to the NFL team. So while there might not be a national or Blesto, there will be an NFL Draft Bible. You can guarantee that. And we're looking forward to it. This whole Zoom emergence and shout out to Ryan for throwing the idea out here of doing the video live stream on Zoom. I think if there was never a pandemic, we may have never went this route or direction. So it's great to have this element in our draft coverage, and this is something we're going to continue to bring to you leading up to the 2021 NFL Draft. Now, I was not here yesterday, so we missed out on the dance party. I got an oldie but goodie for you. We'll get out of here on the 2020 season and break it all down and have a good time. But shout out to everybody involved, and you guys might remember this throwback from way back. Let's break it down for the people.
Cypress Hill.
We're chair dancing today.
Chair dancing? I thought you had to get out of your seat to do it.
Probably better athleticism if he stays.
He gets so excited. Look at him.